It's Ken Harbaugh with the MeidasTouch Network. Donald Trump may not attend a single World Cup match until he awards the final trophy, if he even shows up for that. The White House is reportedly in panic mode, trying to figure out how to deal with fans who insist on inventing new ways to mock the president. Here's a raucous crowd of Australians chanting, "The Aussie boys are on a bender, Donald Trump's a sex offender." One of the things that has always been true of soccer/football fans is that they are not obedient. And they have some of the most creative cheers in all of sports. Just Google Norwegians rowing. Trust me, it's worth your time. When it comes to standing up to autocrats, this sport, the beautiful game, has always had a political valence. I talked to Musa Okwonga about this. He's an author, journalist, and broadcaster whose writing on soccer, politics, and culture has appeared in The Economist, The Guardian, and The New York Times, and he now co-hosts a new show on the Valor Media Network about the intersection of the World Cup and politics. Here's our conversation. Musa, thanks so much for joining us. The World Cup has always been a political event, as much as the soccer slash football purists say that sports rises above politics. That's not really the case. And your new podcast goes into such wonderful detail about the history of the World Cup and how, even though it has been attached at times to fascist movements, let's not even get started with FIFA, the fans themselves have used it as an organizing tool against fascism. And there really is no more important time than today, with the World Cup in the United States, the most powerful nation in the history of the world, in the grip of a fascist movement. Give us the primer on your show and what we should be learning from this moment.
Absolutely. So I did it with my co-hosts, Julio and Merritt. And the idea is that we're kind of like football or soccer time travelers, going through time and looking at points at which soccer or football, whatever you choose to call it, has been used as an organizing ground for progressive activism. So we go throughout history. We start with Mussolini's Italy, and we sweep forward towards the modern day, stop off in Mexico, Algeria. And the incredible common thread, I think, in each of these movements is optimism at the grassroots in the most unlikely places. I think that's the kind of overarching headline. So that's the thing that unifies the podcast. And I think also one thing we bring to it is curiosity, I think. What lessons from the past can we take forward?
Soccer fans are not obedient. And it feels like every time there is an attempt by an authoritarian regime, as there is right now, to co-opt the energy and the spirit of the beautiful game, the fans themselves rebel. I am sure you have seen some of the footage of fans from other countries marching through the streets of America in support of their teams, shouting anti-fascist slogans. It seems to have caught our administration a bit by surprise, but this is not new. Fans throughout the history of the game have not been obedient.
Yes, and it's a beautiful thing. I'll just mention one example that I love. Algerian fans in Kansas meeting locals and then people going, oh my God, like unaware of the history because it's such a rich one. And there's a direct thread between that, I think, that spirit of enterprise and unruliness. You go back to what Corinthians are doing in the early 1980s in Brazil, when you had this pro-democracy movement against the military dictatorship. And at that time, I don't know who you compare Socrates to, Brazil's Socrates, but if there's such a figure in maybe like a sort of visibility of a Colin Kaepernick, but the skill level was closer to like a Muhammad Ali, really, or a Tom Brady. So you had this like astonishing footballer, soccer player, like very photogenic, but able to rally those same unruly supporters 2 generations ago. And if they could do it, then why can't we, I guess?
The story of the Algerian national team is riven through with this anti-fascist, anti-authoritarian impulse. Can you give us the short version of that? Because it arose out of colonial occupation.
I love you mention this. Thank you for mentioning this, because that example is incredible, right? So you have, Algerian independence movement trying to gain some kind of traction against France.
Give us the time frame here.
Right. So this is like 1960s, and they're trying to create this movement against France, the colonial power. And what do you do when you're trying to get cultural traction? And this is the genius of it all. It's not enough to have slogans. What we need actually is we need to capture the imagination. We need to capture a vision of how this can look. So what they do is they create a parallel, like national soccer team, and they go around and start playing against countries all over the world. And it's incredible. It's the kind of, to be honest, it's the model that could be replicated today with any number of countries having challenges now. You look at maybe like Western Sahara, dealing with Morocco right now, creating like a parallel movement and going, actually, we're the true team. We're not some kind of proxy, and just turning up and going around and providing a feel-good platform for self-expression. You look at what Bad Bunny did at the Super Bowl. It's a similar thing. The genius of this movement was to create something which was showing that love was greater than hate. And this is what makes the World Cup, I think, and its grassroots supporters at a progressive level so dangerous to a fascist state.
Hey, it's Ken with a quick break and a favor to ask. As many of you know, I travel to Ukraine often to report on what's going on there. One of the units that has taken really good care of me is the 34th Coastal Defense Brigade. They have asked for help with a fundraiser to upgrade a motor for one of the boats that conducts evacuations along the Dnipro River. Every dollar helps, and every cent of every dollar goes towards this cause. Valor Media is covering all the admin costs, so you don't have to. Please check out the link below and consider pitching in to support this extraordinary Ukrainian unit. I've seen them in action. Trust me, they've earned it. Appreciate the help. Click the link below. Thanks. Someone like Bad Bunny in our culture is given a certain amount of license for that kind of expression. Athletes are given less. In fact, they're often criticized for using their platforms, their popularity, their fan base, to try to affect social change. What is your advice to the athletes themselves? And I'm hoping you can direct this to the U.S. teams. You may have seen the video of the call between our president and the head of the U.S. men's team. And there's a lot to unpack there, reading between the lines. But I do not envy the position that the athletes are in right now, many of them understanding just how authoritarian and brutal our regime is, but being in a position where they have to represent the whole country.
I don't envy it at all. And I think that the advice varies on the position you're in. There are some players who are early in their careers who could lose years of their careers. We've seen that happen. It happened to Kaepernick. He was in his prime when he got to the Super Bowl and couldn't get a contract pretty much after that. Now, I would say, think how much you have to lose and act accordingly. If you're towards the end of your career, you're not going to live in the US again, most of your family's overseas, then you can go for it. I don't even necessarily think that those individual players have to take a stand, because the question is, what's the strategy? If the strategy is to affect X, then actually you can affect things more behind the scenes with money, donations, strategic placement of jerseys in different places. Like, there's a lot you can do other than put yourself on the chopping block, because here's the thing, you only get to put your neck on the guillotine once. So if you're going to put it there, you've got to do it like Tale of Two Cities style, when you are clear that the direction of the strategy is going to lead you towards wherever. And I'm not saying people shouldn't put their neck on the guillotine. I'm saying have a long-term strategy in place, just as Muhammad Ali did, just as Kaepernick did. And I think that you can say that both of them were successful in terms of how they shifted the conversation.
How about international players and international pressure? And this is especially difficult for the U.S. because, and this is not a compliment to my country, we pride ourselves on not caring what the rest of the world thinks until the Strait of Hormuz is closed.
I think that actually this is interesting, because as a close follower of American sport and as someone with many relatives in the US, America cares deeply how it's perceived, and especially in sport. In the same sense, and I think American sport right now is in a period of kind of relative crisis, right? The best player in the world in some of the key American sports is not even American. Arguably in basketball, it's Brunson right now, closely followed by Wembanyama. In baseball, Ohtani. Like, I remember when Ichiro came through for Seattle for the Mariners, and that was kind of a new thing. And now, like, it's completely been normalized. So I think there's a kind of cultural crisis in American sport. And if you bring into that soccer players who are bigger than American athletes, who speak out for progressive issues, like, for example, Kylian Mbappe, who recently criticized the French far right very openly just a few weeks ago. If you have that kind of cultural figure coming into the US and critiquing America, that, I think, is new territory for the US. And with everyone watching, I think it's politically quite dangerous for members of the current administration. So I'd encourage them to do it, because here's the thing, they get on a plane afterwards. And there's a few people, you look at, like, for example, Jackson Irvine, the Australian national team. There are a few people at this World Cup, which has more teams than ever, by the way, who can create a critical mass for speaking out against this administration.
Is our treatment of fans, is there a way to use that to open the eyes of Americans to how ordinary people are being treated in this country, to include immigrants?
Absolutely. Look, I've declared an interest here. I'm a member of an organization called Reboot FIFA, which is basically an organization which is trying to engage the biggest class action lawsuit against FIFA. I'm a member of the advisory board, and the idea there is that FIFA is not fit for purpose to run the sport. And we're trying to highlight cases of fan treatment in the wider context, because these fans are not being kept out of the country because they're fans. They're being kept out because the majority of them are black or brown. So, for example, Senegal, the Ivory Coast. And by using these as a lever, we can find a way into the wider conversations about, if this is how they're treating people when the spotlight of the world is on them, then what the hell is happening to people being deported to third countries? What the hell is happening to people? What is ICE doing in the middle of Vermont, a progressive state? So it's using that as a lever to open wider conversations.
What are some of the standout moments so far in this tournament that give you hope that soccer can be an instrument for the kind of change it has been historically?
Small example, but amazing example for me. Someone watching Ivory Coast against Ecuador saying the fans are in the car park for hours on end and they don't want to leave. This unity, I think, is the most important part. The fact that people are going to come together across differences. Scotland and Haiti after the game, where Scotland defeat Haiti. First time Haiti have been at that tournament in years, and everyone's just celebrating like they're having like a barbecue, like tailgating. For me, that's the challenge. That's the opportunity to bring people together, but also fans are demonstrating that every single week of this World Cup. And I think that by the end of this, people will look back at this World Cup and be like, the roots of our grassroots movement started here.
What do you say to those of us who have a reflexive aversion to any kind of success that accrues to the benefit of this administration? I remember so many of us when the World Cup, like America 250, was being, amplified and celebrated. We knew that the administration was going to take credit. We knew that it was going to be an asset for them going into the most critical midterms in America's history. How can we love the beautiful game and still resist the administration's attempt to make it about them?
I have examples from history. Nobody has the right to steal your joy. Just as Brazil's World Cup victories in 58, 62, and 70 were achieved under military dictatorship, no one will ever say, oh, yes, well, Pele winning as a black 17-year-old is a symbol of fascism. Nobody says that, because there are parallel narratives that exist within sport. And don't get me wrong, sporting nationalism, you won't find many bigger enemies of that than myself. And at the same time, the seeds that were planted, if you look at Pele and his lineage, some black players weren't allowed to play for clubs in Brazil until the 1920s, right? This is 1888, slavery has ended in Brazil. In 1958, a black teenager wins a World Cup. And then years after that, you have presidents of African heritage, the presidents of Brazil, who are from the most unruly parts of Brazil. So the current president of Brazil, President Lula, from Pernambuco, from Recife, I don't think you get that without black people proving themselves on the stage once they're given a chance. And I think the lineage, the positive, progressive political lineage in Brazil comes directly through football. So there's an example right there. So I think whatever happens under this administration, win or lose, don't despair, as Grant Wall would say, always optimism, always forwards.
Love it. Where can people find the podcast, and what is one thought you want to leave us with as Americans about the World Cup?
We can find the podcast, Our Copa, on all platforms, good or bad or different. And I would also say my advice to Americans this World Cup, keep loving, keep pushing.
Thank you so much, Musa. Would love to have you back. And what's your team?
Do you know, I guess I'm bound to support England by nationality, but I don't feel the real lure there. I think probably Senegal, actually.
Love it. All right. We'll keep an eye on them. Thanks, Musa.
Thanks, Ken.
That was me and Musa Okwonga, host of the Our Copa podcast. Here's the trailer for that show. Check out the link in the show notes below.
The first ever World Cup happened in 1930.
And the first time the World Cup flirted with politics was in
1930.
Soccer,
or football,
is the most global, most politicized sport in modern history. We'll traverse the last 100 years to deliver you to the soccer fields, where political organizing, collective action, and civilian uprising against empire have been a feature, not a bug.
I'm U.S. professional soccer player Merritt Mathias.
I'm journalist and football superfan Julio Ricardo Varela.
And I'm journalist and soccer pundit Musa Okwonga.
And we're so excited to bring you our Copa! Join us every Tuesday for the next 6 weeks as we break down some of the pivotal moments in soccer history.
Find us on Valor Media YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Starting June 2nd.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.